Lucas Cole and Sophie Miller grew up together, the very definition of childhood sweethearts. Before we were even born, our parents joked about matchmaking us. Back then, society hadn't shifted so drastically, and the class divide wasn't a chasm yet. My house and Sophie's were separated by a single fence, but the difference was stark. I lived in the older row houses on the east side. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a school principal. Our house was strict, filled with hushed tones. I was Lucas, quiet, taking after my dad, content to tinker with things alone. I could spend an entire afternoon dismantling an old alarm clock. Sophie lived in a new development on the west side. Her dad was in business, real estate, wealthy. Her mom taught music and carried herself with an effortless elegance. Sophie was the textbook definition of the perfect child, pretty, well-dressed, always smiling, as if she'd never known a bad day. That we became inseparable was purely accidental. When we were 5, her ball rolled in my yard near the fence. She climbed over to get it and was chased by Mr. Henderson's vicious German shepherd. She was screaming her head off. I don't know where I found the courage, but I grabbed a baseball bat bigger than I was and charged. I swung blindly until the dog backed off. Since then, she became my shadow. We walked to school and back together every day. I walked on the street side, shielding her from traffic. She never stopped talking. Lucas, look at those flowers. Lucas, the corner store has those new candies, chirping away like a little sparrow. I usually just offered a grunt of acknowledgement, listening. Once, some older punks pulled her ponytail and mocked her dance walk. I saw red. I charged in and tackled the leader. I was smaller, but I fought dirty and pinned him down. Of course, I got beat up too. Split lip, hoodie ruined. When the teacher demanded to know why I fought, I refused to speak, just standing in front of Sophie. She was sobbing behind me. When everyone left, she pulled out a scented handkerchief and clumsily wiped my face, asking through tears, "Lucas, does it hurt?" I shook my head. Seeing her eyes red as a rabbit's, my own pain vanished. It was worth it. In middle school, Sophie grew even prettier. Boys started chasing her, sliding notes into her locker, texting her constantly. It bothered me, but I couldn't say it. All I could do was wait for her every morning like clockwork and meet her after school. She took it for granted, naturally linking her arm in mine, telling me everything, even how cute the quarterback was. I just listened, pedaling my bike furiously on the way home. The moment it really hit me was the summer I turned 14. Again, I got into a scrap defending her name. Under the crooked oak tree in our old neighborhood, Sophie called me an idiot while gently cleaning my cuts with a wet wipe. The sunset lit up the peach fuzz on her cheeks. She was so close, the scent of jasmine shampoo filling my senses. Watching her fret over me, my heart hammered. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Sophie, don't be scared." She looked up, eyes still red. I took a breath, more nervous than I'd been in the fight, and said with absolute seriousness, "Someday, I'm gonna marry you." We both froze. The wind seemed to stop. The cicadas went silent. Sophie's face turned bright red. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached out and gently covered my clenched fist resting on my knee. In that moment, fireworks went off in my chest. I thought, this is it. She's the one. I believed the path we walked together would lead straight into forever. After high school graduation, we both got into colleges in Chicago, but the campuses were on opposite sides of the city. I went to a top-tier tech university for mechanical engineering. I kept to my steady, almost rigid routine, dorm, library, lecture hall. I rarely partied. My biggest expense and joy was taking the hour-long train ride every weekend to see Sophie, treating her to a nice dinner, and buying her small gifts with money I earned from odd jobs. My future was clear: graduate, get a stable engineering job, buy a house in the suburbs, and marry Sophie. I thought that was the blueprint for happiness. Sophie, however, attended a prestigious arts college downtown, studying art management. College opened a new world for her. She joined sororities, mingled with eclectic crowds, learned makeup, and dressed fashionably. She shared her new life with me. Avant-garde lectures, gallery openings, viral trends. But our frequencies began to desynchronize. When she excitedly explained a conceptual art piece, I'd honestly say, "I don't get it, but if you like it, that's cool," and hand her a bottle of the strawberry milk she loved as a kid. When I explained how I solved a complex torque issue on a prototype, she tried to look interested, eyes glazing over, before saying, "Wow, you're so smart." We still met weekly, but her phone buzzed constantly. She'd smile at the screen. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Just someone from the art collective discussing a project." I felt a heaviness in my chest, but told myself to trust her. She was just expanding her horizons. The shift happened late one autumn when we were 19. During our date, she checked her phone incessantly. The message notifications were like raindrops dampening the air between us. When I walked her back to her dorm, she lingered at the entrance. The streetlights stretched her shadow long, almost touching my shoes. "Lucas, there's this senior." Her words were carried away by the wind. I pretended not to hear, reaching out to fix her bangs. She looked down, familiar shadows under her eyes, but she felt distant. We didn't say it, but a wall had risen between us. Later, I learned about him. Julian Vance, a transfer student in fine arts with a smile that could melt glaciers. He taught Sophie color theory in the studio, told her eyes looked like Monet's water lilies, and tilted his umbrella over her in the rain, soaking his own shoulder. He'd wipe paint off her eyelash with intimate ease. I first saw him at her college's art showcase. Sophie stood before a painting titled Morning Light, a girl in a white dress under a tree, holding a note. The guy standing next to her looked at her with a tenderness I'd never seen before. I waited under the old tree outside her dorm for 20 minutes, holding a box of expensive macarons and an art book she'd mentioned. The early summer wind was sticky and irritating. Then I saw them, Sophie and a guy walking shoulder to shoulder, laughing, a relaxed, resonant laughter. He was tall, wearing a structured black jacket, hair perfectly styled. They were discussing post-rock bands and gallery lighting, using vocabulary I couldn't penetrate. She walked beside him, looking up, eyes shining. I knew that look. It was the look she used to have when we talked about our future. But now, I wasn't the source of that light. Julian saw me. His gaze paused on me for a second, then dropped to the plastic bag with the cute bakery logo in my hand. His look was calm, not aggressive, but worse, it was a natural, patronizing assessment. As if saying, "Oh, this is the childhood friend." Sophie followed his gaze, saw me, and her smile faltered before returning. "Lucas, you're here." Her tone was light, but laced with awkwardness. "This is Julian, my mentor. We just finished setting up the exhibit." Julian stepped forward and nodded, barely a greeting. He smelled of cedar and oil paint, a scent that clashed violently with the detergent and cafeteria smells of the dorms. I gripped the plastic bag, the crinkling sound loud in the silence. The box of macarons suddenly felt heavy and ridiculous. She stood between us, straddling two worlds. At dinner, I was silent. Finally, I asked, "That Julian guy, you guys are close?" Sophie was scrolling on her phone. Julian? Yeah, he's great, super talented. He helps me a lot. He knows everything. I learned so much just talking to him." Listening to her, I felt like I had swallowed a stone. That was the first time Lucas realized that in Sophie's new world, there were territories he couldn't enter, and people who could navigate them with her better than he could. In the future, maybe don't get too close to him, Lucas choked out, his tone stiff. Sophie looked up, frowning. "Lucas, what does that mean? We're just classmates. Can you stop being so insecure? I'm studying art. I need to understand this world. You don't get it, and he's willing to help me. I can't just rude reject him. Don't overthink it." That was their first unhappy parting. On the bus back to his campus, Lucas watched the city lights blur, feeling a powerlessness he'd never known. The girl he had protected for over a decade seemed to be flying toward a sky he couldn't touch, moving at a speed he couldn't match. And he was still standing stubbornly in the past, guarding an old promise made under an oak tree. Since meeting Julian, Lucas felt a suffocating pressure. He didn't ask about Julian again, but he observed Sophie more closely. Her makeup was sharper, and the phrase, "Julian says," appeared constantly. He kept making the crosstown trek, bringing her favorite snacks. But the dynamic had soured. Once, he excitedly shared that he'd spent all night debugging a robotics project. Sophie listened, eyes wandering before nodding. "That's nice." She immediately grabbed her phone to reply to a text, a smile playing on her lips. Lucas swallowed his words. He recognized that smile. It used to be his. Another weekend, they arranged to meet at a park. Lucas arrived early. 30 minutes later, Sophie ran up, smelling faintly of turpentine. "Sorry, Lucas. Julian was helping me fix a canvas. I lost track of time." She was breathless, eyes bright with creative adrenaline. Lucas silently handed her a water bottle. He wanted to ask, did he paint it or did you? But he stayed silent. The smell of turpentine was an invisible barrier. He tried to change. He stopped talking about code and awkwardly Googled artists she mentioned. "Hey, I heard there's a new video installation exhibit. Want to go?" Sophie looked surprised, then gave a polite, distant smile. "You're interested in that?" "Honestly, the reviews say it's derivative. Plus, I already went with the art collective last week." The conversation died. Lucas felt like an outsider, trying to crash a party that had already started without him. Eventually, Lucas stopped trying to force his way into her art world. and Sophie stopped sharing things he wouldn't understand. Lucas threw himself into his own domain, logic mechanics code. The robotics lab became his sanctuary. While Sophie and Julian discussed Monet's use of light, Lucas and his team pulled all-nighters optimizing servomotor algorithms. His talent flourished here. His professor called his patience rare and his structural intuition gifted. During a national collegiate robotics competition, the mechanical arm Lucas designed helped his team take first place thanks to its stability and obstacle avoidance logic. When the news broke, his first instinct was to tell Sophie. He stared at his phone, drafting a text. But opening their chat, he saw the last message was from 3 days ago. He had asked WID. She had replied hours later. Studio, busy, attached with a photo of a wild, expressive painting that clearly mimicked Julian's style. The urge to share froze. He closed the app and shoved the award certificate into the bottom of a drawer. This victory belonged to a world she didn't care about and couldn't understand. He realized they were like two streams that had merged but were now flowing irrevocably in different directions. His value didn't need to be validated by her anymore. Despite the realization, Lucas still visited Sophie the week after the competition, bringing snacks and even a small art trinket. He still wanted to try. To him, Sophie was still the sun. But during their time apart, Sophie had sensed the drift too. With Lucas, she felt safe but bored. He couldn't provide the intellectual resonance she craved. When she talked about her dreams, he offered practical, buzzkill advice. That's risky. Maybe focus on a stable job first. Julian was different. He encouraged her wild ideas. Why not try it? He showed her a vibrant, unpredictable life. She started making excuses to cut dates short. Group meeting, homework. She felt guilty, but mostly relieved. The breaking point came on a rainy weekend. Lucas was walking her to her dorm. Her phone rang. She checked it and answered immediately, her voice light and eager in a way Lucas hadn't heard in months. Hello, Julian? Oh, I fixed the composition. Send it now? Okay, I'll run up to the dorm and Wi-Fi it to you. She hung up and walked faster. Lucas held the umbrella, half a step behind. The rain hammered the canopy, loud, but unable to drown out the silence in his heart. Watching her hurry for another man, he felt the distance wasn't half a step, but a galaxy. At the dorm, she grabbed the umbrella. Safe trip back. Text me. She turned and ran inside without waving. Lucas stood in the rain, shoulder soaking through. He watched the heavy door close, shutting him out of her world. He didn't leave immediately. He stood in the downpour, fingering the hard fruit candies in his pocket, her childhood favorites. He knew things were different now. There was no fight, no breakup speech. But the bond of intimacy was dissolving, worn away by invisible forces. He was still holding his end of the rope tight, but Sophie had let go. Standing there, memories flooded him. The promise under the tree, the little girl scared of the dog, the girl who struggled to fit in freshman year. His vision blurred. He couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. Lucas didn't remember how he got back to his campus. His mind was chaos. For months after, they didn't speak. Once, Lucas invited her to his university's centennial celebration. She declined, citing a gallery event. Time fast-forwarded to senior year. Most students were interning. Sophie, under Julian's wing, was making a name for herself in the local art scene. Her work appeared in boutique exhibitions. She was radiant, confident, but carried a new air of detachment typical of her circle. Lucas, backed by solid tech skills and awards, secured a position as an R&D engineer at a top-tier tech giant. The job fit him perfectly. No social fluff, just logic and precision. He became quieter, steadier. The anxiety Sophie caused was replaced by a grounded strength. Occasionally, working late in the lab, he'd look at the city lights and think of the girl who once wiped blood from his lip. The ache was there, but it was dull, settling into acceptance. He began to understand that some people are only meant to walk with you for a part of the journey. And he had to keep walking. Sophie got what she wanted. With Julian's recommendation, she landed an internship at a prestigious downtown gallery. She navigated opening galas and artist studios, her makeup flawless, her mannerisms adapting to the elite crowd. Yet, behind the glamour lay immense pressure. The gallery politics were cutthroat, the artists temperamental. As a newbie, she was run ragged. Her passion for art was being eroded by administrative trivia. She often wondered, is this the art I dreamed of? She believed art should include everything, but her world seemed exclusive and judgmental. Occasionally, she missed Lucas, his pure, agenda-less care. But those thoughts were quickly washed away by deadlines or arguments with Julian about artistic concepts. Her relationship with Julian now that the initial worship had faded, showed cracks. She realized Julian's world was vast, and she was just a small part of it. His kindness came with critique and conditions, far less grounding than Lucas's clumsy loyalty. Meanwhile, Lucas started his career. His office was bright, rigorous, and efficient. He remained a man of few words, but his reliability won his colleagues' respect. His code was clean, his logic bulletproof. He rented a small apartment near the office, living a simple life. Work, gym, books, tech news. Soon, a project he led on computer vision and dynamic motion capture made a breakthrough. Because of its potential application in digital art, the project was invited to a tech and art innovation forum. Lucas was the keynote speaker. The venue was hypermodern. Giant data screens flanked abstract media installations. Lucas stood at the check-in desk in a fitted dark suit. He looked calm, a stark contrast to the loud, eccentrically dressed art crowd, yet oddly stable. Lucas. He looked up. Julian Vance. Julian looked as aristocratic as ever in a designer blazer, holding an espresso, eyeing Lucas with surprise and a hint of reappraisal. Mr. Vance. Hello. Lucas nodded, his voice calm. No old grudges, no fake warmth. I didn't expect to see you here, Julian said, glancing at Lucas's VIP badge. You're working in this field now? His tone held a trace of his old superiority, but tempered with caution. Yes. Computer vision and algorithm optimization, Lucas replied concisely. Well, that's unexpected. Julian smirked, tried to regain the upper hand with his usual critic's tone. In my view, the engineering mind struggles to grasp the emotional beauty of art. Forums like this are usually more concept than substance. The old Lucas might have stayed silent, but this Lucas looked Julian in the eye, gaze steady. Mr. Vance, you seem to attribute everything to art, while dismissing the truth of engineering. When we precisely capture the trajectory of a leap, mapping every subtle muscle change to real-time generated light and shadow, does that process not require emotional understanding? Lucas continued, his voice steady. Is scientific representation not a form of art? Perhaps my definition differs from yours, but shouldn't art be all-encompassing? Or is believing that beauty only exists on canvas and sculpture just another form of narrow-mindedness? Julian looked stunned. Lucas checked his watch. I have to prep backstage. He nodded once more and walked away, stepped solid. His words cut like a scalpel, exposing the technical skeleton beneath the artistic skin. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a peer-to-peer correction from a different dimension. Julian watched him go. He realized Lucas's rigidity wasn't a lack of understanding, but a foundational way of building the era's new art. It seems. I was the narrow one, Julian muttered, complicated emotions crossing his face. Lucas took the stage. The audience included artists, curators, and engineers. He opened his presentation, displaying complex algorithms. Good afternoon. Today I will discuss. His voice rang clear through the speakers. Professional, authoritative, undeniable. Watching from the back, Julian realized that what Sophie had given up was a man she never truly saw clearly, a man who belonged to a silent, sturdy, magnificent world she never entered. Lucas finished. He had found his language, his battlefield, and he had won. As for Sophie and the tangled past, seeing Julian again made him realize they were just blurry faces in the crowd now. No longer clear, no longer vital. Years passed. On an autumn day, Sophie's personal brand, Dawn, held its first major independent exhibition at a renowned museum. The crowd was dense. Her work had evolved past Julian's influence. It now blended childhood memories, gritty street life, and bold imagination. One series, Mechanical Flora, used scrap metal to create lifelike flowers. Another, Traces, depicted peeling walls of old alleyways. One painting vaguely showed the backs of two children sitting side by side. She wore a modified Cheongsam-style dress she designed, moving gracefully among the press and collectors. Sophie had fought her way to the top of the art world. Through talent, family support, and years of grit, she had become the shining star she always wanted to be. After seeing off a curator, she stood with a glass of champagne in front of a painting titled Old Days. The alley. In the painting, a crooked oak tree cast a long shadow. It was empty but filled with memory. She suddenly thought of a few days ago. She had seen Lucas on a live stream of a prestigious tech innovation summit. He was accepting an award for advanced human-computer interaction. The camera zoomed in. He was still quiet, bowing slightly calm. But beneath that calm was the undeniable glow of a man at the peak of his field. In that moment, she felt no jealousy, no regret. Just a soft, complex sigh. They had both become wonderful people. Just not together. 5 years post-graduation, the class president organized a reunion at a stylish gastropub. Lucas hesitated. He had been buried in work, leading his team to crack industry problems. He was insulated, but vague nostalgia for his youth made him go. He pushed open the door to a wave of noise. People had changed, gained weight, dressed better. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto a window seat. Sophie. She wore a sharp, apricot-colored dress. Her hair was curled, and she looked thinner than he remembered, but elegant. She was talking to a woman, smiling perfectly. Under the lights, her profile was soft and familiar. As if sensing him, she looked up. Her gaze cut through the crowd and landed accurately on him. The air seemed to freeze for a second. Across the years and the noise of the crowded room, their eyes met. There was no awkwardness, no surge of drama. It was a calm confirmation, acknowledging each other's existence, and the marks time had left on them. Lucas looked away first, nodding at the class president, and moved toward the table where the guys were gathered. He felt her gaze linger on him for a few seconds before drifting away. Halfway through the party, the alcohol was flowing and the atmosphere loosened. Someone shouted for Sophie to give a speech about the love life of a successful female entrepreneur. Sophie held the microphone, her smile practiced. Her eyes drifted, skimming past the neon lights outside the window, then, seemingly by accident, sweeping over the dark corner where Lucas sat. She didn't stop. Love. She laughed softly, her voice echoing slightly. I'll let it be. I think figuring out how to live for yourself is more important than anything else right now. She didn't mention anyone, but the sentence rippled through Lucas like a pebble in a lake. He looked down at the tea leaves swirling in his cup. He remembered years ago when she was crying while putting a Band-Aid on him. Lucas, stop fighting. You have to be okay. Now, they were both okay. Just irrelevant to each other. The party broke up late. People said their goodbyes at the door. Lucas and Sophie were pushed together by the crowd, ending up as the last two waiting. The noise faded, leaving only the cool autumn wind and the city's distant hum. They stood under a street lamp, shadows stretching long. Long time no see, Sophie said first. Her voice was more real than it had been inside, tinged with fatigue. Yeah, long time. You look good. She looked at him with pure observation, stripped of past dependence or resentment. You too, Lucas nodded. Your brand. It's doing well. Thanks. She tucked a strand of wind-blown hair behind her ear. I heard your project won an award. Congratulations. Just luck. A brief silence followed. It felt like there was everything to say and nothing that needed saying. Well, my Uber is here. Sophie pointed at her phone. Okay, Lucas said. Get home safe. You too. No exchanging numbers. No, let's keep in touch. They were like two ships meeting in the night, sounding a horn in salute before continuing on their separate courses. Lucas watched Sophie get into the car. The taillights blinked at the corner and vanished into traffic. He took a deep breath of the cold air. The city sky was stained red by light pollution. No stars were visible. When Sophie got home, she opened an old sketchbook. The first pages were childish doodles. She stopped at a page in the middle. There, drawn in pencil, were two stick figures holding hands. Next to them, in teenage Lucas's neat, almost rigid handwriting, promise, Lucas will marry Sophie. Pinky swear, cross my heart forever. Beneath it, a clumsy heart drawn in red marker. Sophie stared at the page for a long time. Time seemed to reverse. The summer evening, the boy's nervous, determined eyes, her own racing heart. The memory was as clear as yesterday. She didn't cry. The corner of her mouth lifted in a complex arc. Nostalgia, a touch of sorrow, but mostly peace. She picked up a pen. Below the promise, in her now fluid, mature script, she wrote, "The promise is a dream of the past. Wishing you a bright future. Take care." She slowly, carefully tore the page out. She didn't throw it away. She placed it in a small, empty frame and set on the top shelf of her studio, alongside other mementos. It was no longer a contract to fulfill, but a specimen of her growth, preserved by time. Proof that their youth had been real and burning, and proof that they had both been brave enough to move on. She walked to the window, looking at the city lights. She knew that somewhere under those lights, Lucas was focused on his world, perhaps with someone by his side who appreciated his silence. At that moment, Lucas felt an unusual calm. The girl who had once caused him so much pain, who had forced him to change, had finally become a familiar stranger he wished well. The play of youth was over. They had walked onto different stages, and this time, he could truly let go. They were like two stars that had once drawn infinitely close, illuminating each other, only to pass and follow their own orbits into the vast galaxy, no longer intersecting, but still, in their own ways, shining. Story complete.